This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and good morning from me, Carl Smith, on Teachers Talk Radio, where we ask the question this morning, how to survive the complaint crisis and give a practical strategy for teachers and leaders.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to the Friday Break Show with me, Carl Smith. This is the show where we tackle the big questions in education, like how do you teach Shakespeare to a class that thinks Macbeth is a new Netflix series? And more importantly, how do you survive the tidal wave of complaints that seem to be crashing into schools faster than you can say, I'm going to Ofsted? Let's be honest, complaints used to be rare creatures. A parent might grumble about homework or the odd detention, and that was that. But now, complaints have evolved. In fact, they've gone full Jurassic Park. They're bigger, louder, and they travel in packs. One email becomes two becomes a thread, and before you know it, you're starring in your very own episode of CSI School Complaints Process. Why the surge? Well, we live in an age of instant feedback. Uber drivers get star ratings, restaurants get TripAdvisor reviews, and teachers, well, we get Facebook rants and a 17-paragraph email sent at 11:59 p.m. Because nothing says urgent safeguarding concern more than a parent who's just discovered their child didn't get picked for the Year 8 dodgeball team. But here's the kicker. Complaints aren't just annoying, they're exhausting. They drain time, energy, and morale. They turn great teachers into paperwork machines and leaders into full-time referees. And if you're thinking, surely there's a... Well, spoiler alert, there isn't. Complaints are here to stay, but surviving them, well, that's an art form. And today we're going to paint the masterpiece. So buckle up. We'll explore practical strategies today, share some real-life horror stories, although the names have changed to protect the innocent, and maybe even laugh at the absurdity of it all. Because if we don't all laugh, we'll cry. And crying isn't on the risk assessment. This is Surviving the Complaints Crisis, a practical strategy for teachers and leaders. So let's dive in before somebody emails in to complain about the length of this introduction. Today, I want to welcome Rachael Smith, a woman who has spent more time than is reasonable thinking about this topic. Rachael, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Carl. It's nice to speak to you.
Certainly good to speak to you. So, Rachael, how did you get into this area?
Well, I was a teacher. So at the very toddlerly age of 23, I walked into a school full of brim and vigour and thought I could change the world. And then obviously was very quickly disillusioned of that strange idea. But I spent 20 years in teaching. And then I wanted to have a bigger impact. So I basically have gone into the charity world. And part of my charity work is to support parents and schools to come together in order to bridge the gap. And mostly for the outcome of young people, really, because we can get embroiled in the soap opera, very, very well captured, I have to say, in your intro. But ultimately, bottom line is there's a young person involved and their potential is linked to how well this relationship can be built. So it's become a real passion of mine to get to the heart of it.
Yeah, no. I mean, seems like it's a real calling. It's really good work. Can I ask? So, did you teach primary, secondary, or what was it?
Oh, I was a secondary school teacher. I was a secondary school English teacher, mostly so I could make it up because um, maths and science terrify me because there's a sort of a
Yeah.
demand that you get the answer right, whereas I could just fluff around the edges. Um, and I was a faculty head attached to a senior team, and then I became a chief examiner. So I became that person that got to judge everyone else.
Ah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Chief examiner, eh? That must be a fun job. Bet there were a few complaints coming in on that role.
Fortunately, you have a fire shield around you at chief examiner level. The exam board takes most of that heat for you, but what it did was it gave me massive opportunity to work with government in order to shape what English could be across the country. So
Mm.
it was a really, it was in some respects equally boring and equally exciting at the same time because obviously reading 1,000 English essays on
Mm.
of mice and men is a bit of a kicker, but getting to influence national policy is exciting.
Yeah, no, well, it is, and you've earned your stripes at the hard end of things. So I think that you've got that. You've walked the walk as well as now having to
Yes.
talk the talk, and I think that counts for a lot. Um, Rachel, big question to start with,
Ooh.
and I realise this answer. Yes, right.
Thanks. Getting
Realise,
there.
yeah, I'll hit you with it straight away. But this big question, I realise, is not an easy one to answer. It takes a lot of reflection and thought, and there are many factors involved. So, why do you think complaints are increasing so much in schools?
There's so much theory around it. Obviously, you touched on it, which is the rise of social media and the ability to instantly communicate. Now, that obviously is for students as well as for parents. So, students, if you allow phones into school, have the capacity to get to their parents in the moment when
Mm,
the emotions are particularly raw. So the parent gets it full tilt rather than maybe the kid waiting until the end of the day and having lost some of that heat. So there's equally obviously then the power of the parent to get in touch with the teacher immediately. So all of that matters, but a lot of the research suggests that the real breakdown started around the time of the pandemic. And
mm,
and what the pandemic did was it gave parents a little bit of a behind the curtains view of education, and gave them a false impression that schooling could be done in a couple of hours because that's what they were doing at home and that's all the school was capable of providing them in the home at
uh-huh,
that point in time. And then obviously now it meant that every parent could potentially feel like they were expert in the educational space because they'd had to do it for such a period of time.
mm,
Now, when the kids came back, there was obviously, I don't know if you felt this, but there was a real upward surge of positivity towards schools
hmm,
when there was a genuine gratitude that
yeah,
the kids were
yeah.
out the home again,
To
um,
start with, yeah.
to start with. But there was then a very quick slippery slope down into the parents having lost a little bit of that taken for granted value that education has.
Mm,
And therein lies the crux of the matter, really, which is we need parents to believe in us as much as the kids do.
mm,
We need them to trust in what we're doing as much as the kids do.
mm,
Um, because if they don't, then they won't fight to get their kid to attend school. If they don't, they'll drip feed negativity in the kid's ear, which then turns up in our classroom. So, all in all, there's a bit of a firestorm, and then add on to that the general difficulties of cost of living crisis, mental health crisis, and all of the big challenges of society, including a good degree of toxicity that's crept into every part of our
mm,
discourse, and out pops a complaints crisis.
mm. That's really interesting. So, do you think, Rachel, that schools got it wrong in the pandemic, or would that be unfair?
That's completely unfair. I think it was an impossible situation for everyone. In fact, I don't think any sort of hindsight now on that situation is fair at all because we'll very easily be able to tell ourselves how we could have done it differently, but it was a novel virus. In other words, a completely unique situation to everyone. So literally everyone was trying their best. Did it go well all of the time? No. Did people do more above and beyond a lot of the time? Well, I saw images of head teachers walking around with packed lunches that they were delivering to kids living in poverty at that time. I saw extraordinary work of transferring a curriculum from in the classroom to online within a matter of weeks. And we both know that schools don't usually work that quick. The transference to an online curriculum would be a 1 or 2 year project. So no, no one's to blame. No one's to blame. It was just a unique situation. And what we have now is a loss of empathy on both sides, and it's that loss of empathy that needs to be resolved. And blame isn't going to help that.
No, and it's interesting the way that you frame that, a loss of empathy, because I don't hear that particular way of framing it very often. I hear people talking about an angry society a lot of the time. I hear people talking about schools not fit for purpose quite a lot of the time. But actually, what you're doing is trying to go beyond those entrenched positions and actually consider, both sides, as it were, a little bit like, I mean, if you, as you know, in teaching, if you get a situation where you have two young people who are, in some kind of fairly hostile dispute with each other, one of the ways of tackling that is to get each to understand the other's perspective, because they rarely do. They can only reinforce their own perspective, and they use every means possible to undermine the other. And of course, that's just a battle. And in the end, battles like that tend to have no winners. But do you think, because there's been a lot of talk about this, do you think that the social contract, to use the phrase that some politicians have used, between schools and parents has been broken?
Well, it was a phrase used by the previous head of Ofsted, who gave it in her leaving speech as the reason why the problem had become intractable. The social contract is an interesting concept in as much as it suggests that there'd been previously an agreement between home and school that what was best for the child was that they go to school and learn. And that teachers knew best in that situation, that everyone was trying their best, and therefore they were going to work together. So if we frame it like that, yes, the social contract can be seen to be broken. But I just think all that does is it gives a nifty phrase to a very human problem. Do you see what I mean? So gives it a nice, pithy political soundbite. But really, what I would say is, for parents, children are their most precious item in their life. And it takes a lot for you to take that precious item and put them in the trust of another adult. You're basically playing on the reptilian instincts of that human being, because everything that they're now programmed to do is to protect that thing, right?
Yeah.
And my challenge to schools is, do you always approach parents with the understanding that they're there because they've been emotionally, I hate the word triggered, but you know what I mean? Their survival instincts are kicked in. They're in a flight or fight mode with you.
Yeah.
And there's something biological in that. But equally, empathetic wise, do parents, when they walk into school, understand that teacher's work probably started at 7 a.m. that morning, where they had to put 2 hours in to prepare for the work and then do the work, and now they've got another 2 or 3 hours to then consolidate that work? Do they know the level of stress and conflict that can go on in a teacher's day? And therefore, do they come to that situation with the right tone of voice, the right body language, the right phrasing or framing? So, yes, we can call it a social contract. It probably has broken. A lot of our social contracts in society are broken.
Mm.
At the moment. But what that does is it helps hide us away from the very human, individual responsibility to look at the other person and go, how hard has your day been today?
Mm,
Do you know what I
mm.
mean?
Is it then, Rachel, that at its heart there is an empathy deficit in society, in that when people are low and upset, they are less likely to have the capacity emotionally to be able to appreciate the other person's experience and perspective? Is it just that we're all lacking in a lot of empathy?
I think, and I don't believe it's anyone's fault that that is the case either, which makes me sound really woolly and no
Yeah.
blamey. But
No.
there is a lot of we're all finding life a little bit hard. A lot of our stats that we collect as the
Mm.
charity indicate that people are in crisis. So, like for instance, 2 million parents claim to have mental health challenges because they're finding parenting so difficult. 1 in 3 feel like they're not getting it right. Do you see what I mean? So,
I mean, I'm interested in that evidence because that's really arresting. So 1 in 3 parents. To go through that again, just so I can take that on board.
So there's 2 million parents suffering mental health because they feel they're getting parenting wrong.
Yeah.
1 in 3 believe they're not getting it right at all. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I can't believe it's only 1 in 3
Mm,
because I think parenting is probably one of the most challenging roles in the world.
mm,
And because they're unpredictable kids, aren't they? And you love them to bits, and they'll go off and do really dangerous things, and then you've got their future to think about, and you don't want to end up in the future in the therapy session. It's because my mum didn't do things right. Do you know
mm,
what I mean? So there's all of that baggage hanging over you that means that parenting is a real hardship. So
mm,
it's very difficult to feel empathy at that point because you're entrenched in how
mm,
hard it is for you.
mm. But some people may be listening and saying, "Well, that's always been how parents, experience life." In the parenting has always been hard. It's always been a
Yeah.
really tough challenge, and yet things are apparently manifesting in a slightly different way. Maybe that's just an illusion, and actually that was always the case. And actually, it's just access and the way people express themselves. I don't know, but are people just buckling? And I mean by people, schools and parents, and obviously many people in schools are parents too. Are people just buckling under the weight of expectations, not
Yes.
only from people like Ofsted and so on, but also from societal expectations of what they ought to do and what is a perfect parent?
Exactly. I mean, we live in a world of 24-hour news,
Mm,
always on social media. I mean, we're all very understanding as adults of how hard it is to grow up nowadays with social media, incurring such massive expectations on our young people,
yeah.
and these really perfect images of what it means to be a human being in terms of our looks, our physical appearance, and our lifestyle. So we're very appreciative of that for our young people, but we should have the same thought for our parents, but also for our education, in as
Mm,
much as a lot is put out there about what it should be,
mm,
and there's a lot of judgment about how we all should be, and nobody can possibly feel good enough
no.
with that constant perception of this perfection that lives somewhere out there, which you and I both know doesn't exist.
No.
That we're all striving for something that's well beyond our reach,
Mm,
and what we fail to do in that situation is to stop and look at the positives that people are delivering, because we're always working on a deficit model
yeah.
of what's not there rather than what is there, and I do think that is what the difference is, because we have so much information dropped into us that we cannot process so well.
Mm,
um, that means that we're forced into that sort of deficit model, and aspirational must always be reaching for the what's better.
mm. That is such a good point. And we're really getting into some pretty deep and complex areas here. But in reflecting on them, it's important because we're going to go on a little while, afterwards in this show to very much focus on the practical strategies
Yeah.
that schools, so teachers and leaders in schools, might be able to adopt in order to get this right. But therein lies an expectation that there is a getting it right way, and you will have to meet that standard. And I think one of the things that I feel quite confident in being able to say is people in education are absolutely sick and tired of being held to high expectations on everything they do
Yeah.
relentlessly and without any apparent forgiveness for the possibility that actually this stuff is complicated and it's not always possible to get it perfectly right. So given that, and given the fact that parents equally feel under pressure to be the best parent they can, it's hardly surprising that people start falling out.
Well, and get defensive because when you are under attack from being better all of the time, the only place you can go is to a position of defensiveness, and that's in fact probably what is the root cause of most of the breakdown in communications between home and school. Is that both parties put up the walls of defence and a fortress of defence. I one of the biggest moments of realization for me that there was a problem was when my sister cried when she received a letter from the school about attendance, because the tone of the letter was so strong,
Yeah.
was so judgmental she received it as judgmental, and her perception is her reality in some respects, of her failure for not having met the percentage requirement for attendance for her son, because she immediately felt like a failure, wanted to defend herself, and her immediate option was to go shout at the school. The school equally are under pressure in order to keep the attendance high because we know it's linked to outcomes.
Yeah.
It's so correlated. So they went defensive when my sister went to complain. Do you see what I mean? So it creates an intractable position. But what can I just say? I wanted to dwell a little bit on Ofsted a minute. Are you okay with that?
Very okay with it, please, because it is a huge elephant in the room
It
here.
is. Let's just get it out there, because I had a wonderful. That's not a word I thought I'd ever use. Phone call with Ofsted, because we've been collaborating with them in order to understand how schools can be supported in order to meet the new framework. Because I'm sure you're aware there's something like 21 references to parents now in the new framework, and there's a new leadership and governance requirement for to maintain that parent relationship.
Yeah.
I think we're slightly to blame for that. So sorry to the world, but not sorry in the same instance. But they were shocked because I in that conversation came at it as a teacher and was like, I've suffered many Ofsteds, and they were like, suffered. And I went, well, yeah, suffered is the word. But they think they're coming in as a supportive partner.
Yeah.
And they think that all schools are going to be okay as long as they're meeting the statutory and non-statutory requirements as laid out. As long as you're meeting them, then you've got nothing to worry about for Ofsted. So in a lot of ways, they feel like they're offering a guiding framework in order to support schools to be better. But human nature makes us feel there's too much at stake for us in schools to take it that way. And it was just a really enlightening conversation, because for them it's down to the same thing it's down to for me, which is get parent partnership right, and you add 4 months every year to a kid's progress.
Yeah.
Bottom line, that's it. It just feels quite factual to them. Do you know what I mean? So
it is, but I'm afraid that if we talk about contracts, social or otherwise, the contract of trust between Ofsted and the teaching profession is not just broken, it's been thrown out the window and actually run over by a very large lorry. Obviously, the tragedy of Ruth Perry
Oh, that was
was
awful.
the most appalling example of that. But in fact, that is the probably the most well-known tip of the iceberg, because anybody who doesn't realise at Ofsted that what happens in the period when a school is in the window, never mind when it's trying to prepare before that, if they don't realise that what's happening is a sickening sense of fear, an overwhelming sense that by an arbitrary process they will be subject to the most unforgiving judgment, and the fact that it's public, so it's then it's the modern equivalent of a medieval being put in the stocks on the local high street and having the peasants throwing rotten vegetables at you. It feels very much like a public, unforgiving failure and a career-defining judgment.
Yeah.
And there's no use saying it shouldn't, because it absolutely does, and it's not, that's not going to change. And a failure to appreciate that or empathise with that is a really big issue. Because I think there was a report this morning that came out in, it was an article in the TES, if I can mention that, which said nearly 40% of secondary heads under the age of 50 quit the job within 5 years of taking it up. Now, that is I mean, parental complaints are going to be part of that, but also a lot of other things, and Ofsted plays a very large part in that. I am pretty sure. So we've got some really, really stark issues, and there seems to be a lack of appreciation of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm with you. It was defining for me what judgment they came in, even as a classroom level teacher. It was worse when I was in leadership. I have to admit, but as a classroom level teacher, the label they put on my lesson felt like it defined me for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
And the pressure of that was incredible. But it is the public nature of it and the consequences, which I don't think people fully understand, can be cyclical. So if you get a negative judgment, then obviously the numbers for the school become challenged.
Yeah.
And when the numbers drop, then the school becomes open to transitory students. And because transitory students are so hard to get outcomes from, because of the fact that they're coming in a very challenging situation and they're very difficult to settle in, the school results go down.
Yeah.
And then you get a worse judgment. So it's a very difficult cycle to halt once you're on that cycle. And I'm not gonna lie, it's one of the reasons I'm not in the education system anymore, because it felt like a no-win situation, and I wanted to be in a positive situation like I'm in now, where I can bring about some support for people.
Yeah, and I am sure that what you experienced is shared by large numbers of other people working in the profession currently, or people who have worked in the profession. So that is an enormous factor. This is all brilliant. I'm very aware, Rachel, that people who are listening will be thinking, great, but what can we do?
Yes.
What strategy can we do? So we're going to go on to that. But before we do, we're just going to take a short break to listen to our sponsors and the latest education news. So don't go anywhere. Everybody listen, and then we'll be back shortly.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Teachers, have you heard of Bet UK 2026? It's the world's biggest education and technology event, and it's completely free for educators. From keynote speakers and panel sessions to CPD accredited workshops and networking, Bet UK 2026 is where educators from across the globe come together to share ideas, spark inspiration, and find solutions that fuel our mission to drive better education globally. Get your free ticket today at betshow.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
According to TES magazine, the Department for Education has announced 36 new attendance and behaviour hubs. The latest cohort brings the total number of hub lead schools to 57, with more expected. The 36 include 24 secondary schools and 12 primaries, which the DFE say will offer direct one-to-one support, reaching tens of thousands of pupils across hundreds of schools through sharing best practice at events and open days. More are expected to be announced over the coming year, as the Department for Education has previously said that the hubs will be built around 90 schools, with a track record of improving attendance and behaviour standards. TES has previously reported that school leaders had been concerned about the lack of special schools and alternative provision settings in the first wave of 21 hubs. The latest list still only contains mainstream settings. A Department for Education spokesperson said, "The department is establishing hubs in mainstream primary and secondary schools in the first instance," but went on to say, "We will be strengthening support for AP and special schools through the hubs programme and will share more information in due course." The same article also covers the announcement by DFE that every school in the country will be given an individual minimum target to improve its attendance levels, powered by AI. This announcement has been met with mixed comments from school leaders. A full list of the latest hub schools can be found in TES magazine.
Thank you.
BBC Scotland News says teachers are readying themselves for a vote on industrial action over workload and the amount of time they spend in front of a class. Teachers say it is almost 5 years since the SNP's manifesto promise to cut class contact time by 90 minutes a week, to give them more time for lesson prep and marking. Union bosses say teachers are under unprecedented pressure, suffering from snowballing demands, ever-increasing workloads and, in many cases, burnout. The situation isn't new, but teachers have told the BBC it is getting worse. The EIS union begins its postal ballot in the coming days, and the NASUWT will begin around the same time. The SSTA is not expecting to ballot members. More details can be found online. Schools Week reports that the government has commissioned an independent investigation into rising numbers of young people not in education, employment or training, known as NEET. The review, which will place a particular focus on the impact of mental health conditions and disabilities, is hoped to tackle what Work and Pensions Secretary Pat McFadden has warned is a crisis of opportunity. It will be led by former Social Mobility Commissioner Alan Milburn. Figures show that nearly 1 million young people, approximately 1 in 8 aged 16 to 24, are currently NEET. The government, trying to cut its ballooning benefit bill, says that over 1/4 of NEET young people now cite long-term sickness or disability as a barrier to participation, compared to just 12% in 2013 to 14. Statistics also show that the number of young people claiming universal credit and employment support allowance has increased by more than 50% in the last 5 years. The NEET review announcement comes after new analysis from the Keep Britain Working Review also reveals 76% increase in economically inactive 16 to 34-year-olds with mental health conditions since 2019. Pat McFadden said, "We cannot afford to lose a generation of young people to a life on benefits with no work prospects and not enough hope." Alan Milburn Review will make personal and professional recommendations to help young people with health conditions access work, training or education, according to the government. Interim findings will be shared with the government in spring 2026, with a final report next summer. BBC Channel Islands covers Ofsted and the news that the bailiwick of Guernsey has no plans to adopt the new framework recently launched in UK schools. The island's education president, Paul Montague, said the state signed a new contract with Ofsted in June, which will see it inspect the bailiwick schools for another 4 years. However, he said a change to the inspection system involving the scrapping of grades would not be followed in the islands. Deputy Montague said, "We have our own relationship with Ofsted. We determine how inspections are done." Finally, BBC Asia covers what it calls one of the world's longest exam days. Every November, South Korea comes to a standstill for its infamous college entrance exam. Shops shut, flights are delayed to reduce noise, and even the morning commute slows down. By late afternoon, most of the test takers will be out of the school gates, but not everyone. Blind students are still in the exam room, finishing close to 10 p.m. after taking more than 12 hours to complete the largest version of the test. This year, 550,000 students across South Korea will sit for the test, the highest number of applicants in 7 years. The test dictates whether people will be able to go to university, but it can also affect their job prospects, income, where they live, and even their future relationships. Students answer roughly 200 questions across a range of topics, including maths, Korean, social sciences, and English. The blind students are given 1.7 times the standard testing duration, and students who use braille papers add even more length to their time. There is no dinner break, and the exam goes straight through. You can read more details online. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Hello, Rachel. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Well, we've had a really good discussion about what seems to be going wrong from the perspective of both schools and parents. But now I want to move on, if I may, to what we might be able to do to make things better. First question, big question again. What can schools do to, if they're feeling overwhelmed right now, what can they do to make things feel a bit better?
Well, it's really interesting because we've been doing some work with the DFE to try and to come up as parent kind to come up with a solution and that is simple and offers quick wins. And strangely, the first one is a reframing of the communication that comes in from the parent, because not every communication that comes in is a complaint, but it can feel that way. So some might come in as a query, just a genuine simple question to the school. Some might be just offering you really valuable feedback. Now, this might sound trite, but if you think about it as a school leader or as a teacher, if you are mentally receiving that piece of information in a way that says, "Oh, they just want to know. Oh, that's really good feedback," then the overburdening sense of it being a complaint starts to ease. But it can also help you very clearly and quickly indicate how you might respond. So if I'm coming in with a query, then all I want is a really quick response. If I get that quick response, then it's going no further, right? I'm happy. You've answered my question. If I'm giving you feedback and then I hear nothing, I'm going to get frustrated. It might turn into a complaint. But if you close the communication loop and go, "Really good point. Thanks for giving us that information. We've done X on the back of that," then that parent will be happy. But if they are coming in at a complaint level, then it's about the school making transparent the service level agreement that they have in place in order to support that parent, so the parent knows exactly what to expect coming next, that they don't feel like they're throwing it into a void. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
how long will they have to wait before the school replies? What will be the nature of that response? How can they follow up if they're not happy with that response? What's the next stage in the process? So in some respects, at the moment, for a lot of parents, there is a a sort of like mystery to a school that means they don't know how to get their voices heard. So one of the biggest and quickest ways that a school can overcome that is to make it no longer a mystery. So if you have a query, talk to the classroom teacher with this outcome. If you have feedback, talk to this member of staff with this outcome. If you have a complaint, go to middle leader X with this outcome. And then the parent knows what to expect, who to approach, how to get themselves heard. And the school also very clearly manages the parent in that process. So on a very simple level, it could be just a simple matter of logistics. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So, okay, giving clarity in terms of the way that you frame responses, because people bandy about terms like formal complaint, partly because it attracts attention.
Yes.
But what you're saying is that in practice, quite a few of those won't be properly formal complaints. There'll be something else, and by responding in a way that's clear and understandable, and people know that things have been addressed, that the parent is more likely then to feel that they've been listened to, and that they're satisfied with what's happened. So carry on, because you've got, I don't doubt you've got quite a few practical
for sure.
strategies here.
Well, to be honest, I mean, what we were just saying is on the parent as well as on the school, but it's who takes up the mantle of supporting the parent that's important. So obviously, we're producing a guide that supports the parent to say, if it's this, all you've got there is a query. This is who you approach, and this is how you do it. But the school could do that too. That's a suggestion. The other point is that so according to our stats, because I do like our stats, they're really cool. 85% of parents don't know how to complain. That's what we've just talked about, and schools can support them in that. But 95% of teachers have never been trained in how to handle them.
No.
So what came as a revelation to me when I came out into the commercial, because I went into the commercial sector before I went into charity, is that no business would allow a member of its staff to approach a stakeholder without stakeholder training. But school teachers are supposedly capable of being managers of parental relationships, even though they've had no training in it. Now, I remember when I was 23 and I was sat in front of my first year 10 parents' evening, and I was given bottom set year 10 at that time, because that's what you did to NQTs, to, give them a rite of passage into education. So I was literally sat there as a 23-year-old talking to people 10, 15 years older than me about their child as if I knew better than them how to parent their child. It was always going to be a disaster, right? And I was given no training in how to deal with that. So helping teachers understand how to empathetically manage a situation where a parent is distressed is probably quite crucial. How do you listen actively in order to make the other person feel heard? Is a skill that some people don't have, especially teachers who spend all day talking with kids and having a power dynamic that means that they don't have to necessarily listen as empathetically, potentially. So there's that, but then how do you then show that you agree an action with them? Do you know when you're telling a kid off, and I'll go back to, and you want them to change their behavior, but you don't. I never told them what they should do. I gave them two options and allowed them to choose. Standard good practice, right? And then you got them to agree to it, and then there's a contract between you and the kid about what's better behavior in the future, and you can call them on it in the future if they break that contract. Now it's the same but different with parents, which is they want to have a sense of control over their child's destiny, and rightly so, and they want So if you give them a choice in a situation of things that the school can do, and then they choose the one that best fits what they felt should happen, then you enter into a similar form of contract. And
Okay.
as long as you then respond and deliver on that, you have closed the loop of that conversation. And in all levels of fairness, which life isn't, the parent should be satisfied at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does, and that's great. Yeah. So let's say that the parent doesn't. Let's say that the parent, isn't reasonable. My child shouldn't be given a behaviour point for doing whatever it was. They didn't do it. They've told me they didn't do it. And so there's a difference in the account of events, which is invariably, the situation that arises. What happens then?
Well, there has to be a point where you have to say no to parents and have the parent accept the no, which isn't always really difficult to hear. But again, there are ways of saying that in a way that doesn't close them down and disempower them. So it's all about the framing. So it's all about then bringing in, as you would with again young people, a wider understanding of equitability and fairness across the piece. And again, that might or might not work. And you might be in an intractable situation. And sometimes it's completely fair on the teacher to close the conversation down at that point, because it probably isn't going to get a resolution. But what should always happen at that point is an opportunity for the conversation to continue again at a future time. Because if you just close it down at that point, you leave the parent in a much angrier state, and that's how Ofsted and DFE get complaints sent to them, and it's completely escalated out of all proportion. But as a teacher, you do have the right to put the phone down if you're being abused. You do have a right to end a meeting if it's aggressive, but it's also a duty to say, let's come back to this at X time and we'll try again.
Sure, because it is you talk about parents' evenings, and that's another case in point where a parent becomes very animated and sometimes quite aggressive with a member of staff, and at that point, obviously, a line has to be drawn.
It does.
That's not acceptable. That's not in any way reasonable for staff to have to accept. Obviously, we want to avoid that situation happening in the first place, but
Yeah, and that's what I was just about to say. How can we step back and say why did that situation occur? That situation probably occurred because that might have been the 9th teacher that was giving them a negative feedback on their child that night. That parent had heard that feedback in what is a relatively public arena. So other parents can hear them getting criticised for their child over and over again, especially in a secondary school situation where they go around a hall and basically every teacher's giving them the same message. So as a school leader, it's about stepping back and going, how can we make it so that parent doesn't have to experience what is an incredibly unpleasant evening? Because nobody wants parents coming into school to have an unpleasant experience. It needs to be collaborative and a partnership on how to resolve the issue. So there was a school in Sunderland under a head called Rachael Smith called Macmillan Academy, who I worked with recently, who didn't give those parents a traditional parents' evening. Those parents were allocated a senior leader and they had 20 minutes academic tutoring instead. And it was on the senior leader to go around the different teachers and say, what's the message we have to give? What's the resolution? And then the senior leader got into a conversation with the parent, not as your child is awful, but there are blockers to learning. Things aren't working out. It's making it difficult for other people to learn. What can we do together in order to resolve this? And then there were practicable steps that came out of that academic tutoring at the end.
That's it. That's interesting. What do you have a stance as far as face-to-face versus virtual meetings with parents is concerned?
I have a philosophical stance, and then I have a practical stance, and the two might not necessarily align. So philosophically, I think human beings always work better with other human beings when they're face to face. I think a virtual meeting gives. I work remotely, so I feel this quite a lot, which is the people I work with feel like characters in a TV program.
Yeah.
As opposed to real human beings. And it can get really easy to get into the soap opera mentality where you forget there's a living, breathing, hurt human on the other side of the conversation. So philosophically, I would say face to face helps with the humanity. Unfortunately, there are practical barriers that make that difficult for some, which is the distance that some parents would have to travel to come into school. The size of some schools' catchment areas can be. I mean, the first school I worked at had a catchment area of 100 square miles. So for some of those, and some of the parents who were living in rural poverty at that time, that was a heck of a commitment to come into school. So virtual in that situation is best. Ironically, virtual meetings also create a barrier in terms of poverty because of digital poverty and the idea of parents using their data on something that the school wishes them to do. So I think it's horses for courses. You have to choose the best option for that situation, but always facilitate communication.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely well put. I mean, in my own school, we've been face to face. For a year we didn't when we were at the height of the pandemic, but beyond that, we've gone face to face. Just because I'm with you, I think that you can have a very different conversation with somebody when they're sitting in front of you, and there's all the incidental conversations that happen. So, as a head, I might say hello to a parent, or they might just say, "Oh, while I'm here," and then just mention something. Obviously, in a virtual arrangement, that possibility doesn't really exist. So, there's a lot of human interactions that go into getting a good parents' evening, and they aren't necessarily just involving the one conversation with the subject teacher in that strictly defined format. But I appreciate what you say about the distance and the logistical challenges, and they are sometimes insurmountable.
But there are other, just to drawing some more practical things for that, if you don't mind.
No, please.
There is some really good practice out there of schools understanding the power dynamic and understanding the intergenerational challenge of schools for parents who had a very difficult schooling themselves. So the school building is quite an intimidating place for a lot of people and brings back a whole load of bad memories. And they might not, and so they're immediately coming into that building at an emotional disadvantage, and they see a head teacher on the other side of a desk in a suit, and there is a whole inner child screaming thing going on. Some awesome practice, like there's a head called Sandra Muir in Swindon at the Lawn Manor Academy, who actually hired a village hall, asked her staff to wear informal clothing, hoodies and jeans, and invited some of those parents that found it difficult, the need to reach parents, to come into that village hall to break down that barrier. But equally, there are other schools who've created a room. So imagine you're coming in because you want to have a difficult conversation as a parent, and you're invited into what looks like a living room. So there are two sofas at right angles to each other. There's a coffee machine, there's nice biscuits. And immediately you're going to be disarmed, aren't you? Because that's not what you expected. You expected to be in a very sterile environment. But even on a psychological level, sitting at a right angle to somebody, talking across from one sofa to another, is a much better way to have a personable conversation than either side of a desk. Do you see what I mean? So there are some really small things you can do that can really start to break down some of those very human barriers that people put up. And that's what I mean, why I was so strong on empathy at the beginning of this call.
I mean, I think here, Rachel, there is so much you can say. And I'm conscious that perhaps you've not had a chance to give all the strategies and all the thoughts that you would like to. So I'll carry this program on a little bit longer than the scheduled time, actually, because I think there's quite a bit more to add to it. But we do have to go back to our sponsors. So we'll just get that first, and then I'm coming back again for the top few strategies that we haven't mentioned so far that you advise schools and teachers to adopt. Okay.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Teachers, have you heard of Bet UK 2026? It's the world's biggest education and technology event, and it's completely free for educators. From keynote speakers and panel sessions to CPD accredited workshops and networking, Bet UK 2026 is where educators from across the globe come together to share ideas, spark inspiration, and find solutions that fuel our mission to drive better education globally. Get your free ticket today at betshow.com.
Okay, so thank you. We're back again, Rachel. And what other practical strategies would you give to schools, teachers, school leaders who are listening today?
Well, I'll give you the top 3 that I've heard, because what I don't want to present myself as an expert in parent participation. What I am is a conduit for all the most amazing practice that I hear from around the country, because I'm blessed to have daily conversations with head teachers who are doing the most amazing work. So let's put that into context first. Let's give the credit where the credit is due. So one of the top ones I've heard is getting in there first. So we talked about my sister's reaction to the attendance letter and how emotional it made her. Well, there's a school in Kent called Holywell with Nikki Morell as the head teacher, who basically asks their staff at the end of each day to call those young people who haven't been in class that day. Now, the reason that they do that is not to be judgmental, but to say, oh, is the kid all right? To show a level of care.
Yeah.
But there's another reason, and this one is more to do with almost like a nudge theory of support, which is they then tell them what the child missed that day. So it gives the parent an idea that there is a consequence almost. This is what they've missed. But can you tell your child that this is what they'll experience tomorrow? And what that creates is a moment of psychological safety for that child, of knowing what's going to happen in the school the next day, because that's usually, as you know, as I do, that what stops a kid wanting to come back to school.
Yeah.
Because they're scared they're going to be behind. They're scared they're not going to know what's going on. So it's a really simple strategy, but it's based in the idea that you care about that child and how well they are, which builds a positive relationship and a positive partnership.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 2, and this one's scary, and I'm going to say that out loud because every head in the land will quake at the idea. But it's to do an open parent listening exercise.
Right.
Because the reason why parents get angry is because they don't feel heard. But do not invite them in just to moan at you, because all you'll get is Johnny's coat was lost 14 days ago and you've done nothing about it. And that's not helping anyone, and you just want to roll your eyes. Instead, ask them, what is it that you feel the school needs to hear? And you ask that question, you give them time to reflect, and then you give them opportunity to share with each other, and then you ask them to share with you the most important messages that the school has to hear. Now, there's a school which by a head called Culver Atwell in London, which he called a double RI school when he took it over, which sounds back to the Ofsted ominous.
Yeah.
And he did this, and he did it before he put any action plan in place. So he also talked to all his staff. He talked to all his staff one by one, face to face. Then he brought the parents in and talked to them, and only then did he decide how he was going to make a difference in that school. So that listening is massively important. And the last one is hard but simple. Hard to do, but simple to realize why it's effective. So when I recently went around the country with DFE doing the RISE conferences,
Mm-hmm.
every head I worked with who were a gold award level school gave the same idea, which is they had a way that they did it. So they had the Grace Academy way, the Macmillan Academy way, the King John school way. They had a really strong ethos and sense of identity that you felt like it was very closely tied to the head's personality. I'm not going to lie, but
Yeah.
a very strong identity that the kids knew, the staff knew, but also the parents knew.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interlaced into the curriculum. It was laced through all of their pastoral care. It was laced to all of the way that they chose to communicate this way. And if there was a movement away from the way that the school did it, that's when the parents could challenge the school and the school could challenge the parents.
Right.
And that strong sense of culture is the hardest thing to create, but the most powerful thing for creating a sense of belonging, which ultimately is what feeds into trust, which ultimately feeds into positive partnerships.
Yeah, because it's more likely to foster a community of people who share values, who understand mutually what the process is meant to be achieving, and what they all want from the system. And I think that is very sage advice. Yeah. Okay.
There was a school called Swavesey Village College in Cambridgeshire who brought in a zero tolerance policy for phones. Now you can imagine what hornet's nest you are unleashing with a zero tolerance policy for phones. But they are a community school, a village college. So they literally brought the parents and said, we've got this problem, how do we solve it? And it actually was a solution that came from the parents. Well, you're just going to have to zero tolerance phones, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And because they stuck to their ethos of being a community college that meant that everything was founded in the community and the solution came from the community, they have had very few genuine complaints about the fact that a kid's phone can be confiscated for 7 days if it's seen out in the open.
Well, is that what that's their line they take on phones? Is it 7-day confiscation?
Yep, and not any sizable parental complaint on the back of that, because the conversation started with, parents, we have this problem. Please, can you help us come up with a solution? Rather than, we've got this problem, this is our solution, live with it.
Yeah. One of the things that I introduced in my own school, which I think has been received pretty well, is I do a fortnightly update to parents, and in it, I include what I've called the 15-second survey. So the 15-second survey is designed, first of all, to be filled in very quickly. So it's usually a multi-choice, single question. Occasionally, I then say, if there's any further comment, you can add it here, sort of thing. But and then you deliberately choose topics which you think are going to be of great interest to parents, and then you effectively, in the question, ask them for their view on something. But because my idea was by making it very quick and easy, people were more likely to engage with it. And of course, the danger is you can only draw so much in terms of conclusions from something that's so quick and so generic. But you mentioned the idea of phones, and we were looking at how to adjust our phone policy in school. And we did last term do a 15-second survey with parents on that. And I asked a simple question: do you believe that mobile phones should not be used under any circumstances in lessons? And that's a big question, because, of course, there are some very good reasons why teachers these days will find use of mobile technology for things. But I asked the question, and of course, 75% of parents came back with, we don't want to see them used in class at all, in any circumstances. And we've taken that on board. So then we have adjusted post Christmas to give everybody a chance to prepare, but we've adjusted our approach. So teachers now have been told that they can't allow their students, they can't direct their students to use their phones for any reason. There are, in fact, in practice, a couple of very exceptional cases where, because of coursework reasons in year 11, where young people are taking a photo of but they're under strictly controlled circumstances. But beyond that, not at all. And what I'm hoping will happen is what you say happened, that because this was very much informed by parents directing us, so parents can say, this is the school responding to the concerns that we've raised, and hopefully then that'll foster some degree of partnership and goodwill. So these are all really great. Have you got a couple more? Can we a couple more before we finish?
Wow, you're really draining. You're getting everything out of me. I love it.
Sorry.
I know, I love it. One of the things that really excited me about Grace Academy is the work that they're doing in order to understand their people. So they've actually gone backwards, as they say. They've gone 10 years into the past.
Right.
And they have made all of their homework booklet based, paper based again.
Okay.
And the reason they've done that is because their parents were concerned about the amount of screen time their young people were experiencing, but also there's a heck of a lot of poverty in Coventry, and they had to respond to that. So the reason I give you that as an example is that sometimes we feel that the progress is always forward, and sometimes actually progress is reflecting and evaluating whether we're still using the best tools to our best advantage. And I think that's what is shown there. They've recognized that the best tool that in their arsenal at the moment is paper, and that might be counterintuitive, but in their situation it is. And what that's rooted in is knowing your own context. Because the problem with all of these tips and hints that I'm sharing with you is that they might not work for some schools, but they might work for others.
Sure.
So it's also about knowing your parents, your community, your environment, and responding effectively to that. Another one is about back to the tone of voice. But it's who you want or how you want the parents to perceive you as a professional. So there's a head teacher in Brighton, Matt Poston, who signs all his letters Mark. He keeps it to a single paragraph that he writes himself, and he makes sure it's always very warm and personable and in his tone of voice. And that, again, context-wise, that's a choice he's made because his community very much respects that idea of individuality and humanity, etc. But it might be in a different circumstance where you need to be much more formal and professional and academic in your tone of voice. Joe, who I know from the Life Academy, who I know you saw present with me and when we were in Nottingham, and he takes a much more aspirational tone because he wants his parents to believe that their kids have got. Do you see what I mean? So it's about being certain of the philosophy that you're putting forward and how it meets your context, because ultimately everything comes down to those comms. Do you want a really big one to cap it off?
A really big one to finish would be wonderful.
What if I told you that there was a school that had raised £1 million from local businesses in order to support educational initiatives within their school?
Well, I would tell you that would be so out of everybody's experience that it would be unbelievable.
Well, it's true. In Coventry, £1 million, some of it from a certain building society. But basically what that does is it gives them the opportunity to take every kid to Blackpool for a day out. paid for by a business. They've equally managed to run a food bank every single day, every single weekend, resourced by the local supermarket. So they have literally bid to every business, and every business that's come to them and said, "Can we work with you?" They've said yes. And what that has meant is that they have literally funded extraordinary things like offering washing machines to parents, making sure that they're giving uniform away to kids who can't afford it. But it doesn't come out of the school budget because businesses have a CSR responsibility that the government places on them. They also have a tax incentive for doing that. So it's in the business's best interests to support the local area in whatever way they can. And equally, your school has a bundle of future consumers in there that they want to be seen to be doing good work for. So there are ways. I mean, because you're about to hear in the white paper that's coming out a massive emphasis on schools being the centre of community, community. And the only way you're going to do that is if you get support from a network. So having some sort of facility to get that funding into school will help you do the work that we all want to do, but we're restricted by school budgets. I told you it was a doozy, didn't I?
Well, you did, and you weren't wrong. But mobilising the community, I think, is with such success as that, is something that's incredibly important. So, finally, what I would like to say is thank you so much for being with us today, Rachel. I think you've been an absolute inspiration. And, I hope as many people as possible can hear this program today because it is so incredibly useful. And hopefully we'll lift some spirits and give people a sense of hope moving forward. I'm going to say goodbye now. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening to Teachers Talk Radio today and following me on the Friday morning break show. And I hope to have you with us again in 2 weeks' time. Don't forget to check out Teachers Talk Radio and to follow all the wonderful programs that are there. But for now, have a lovely weekend.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.